It doesn't matter how much you love your job, the Monday after a weekend away is still hard work. And it's made even worse when you realise the fork seals you've ordered for a job on the bench which is stripped out are the wrong ones. Oh well, on to the next set, which seemed to be another pair of fork seals. It's easier to loosen off all the bolts before you jack the front end up, and then I take the suspension settings. I also always remove the mudguard before jacking it up because it's so easy to scratch with the stand. And it was just as I was pulling the fork leg out of the bike I got the perfect delivery for a Monday like this. The people over at Type 2 Detectors have sent me out a new batch of their coffee to try. Just what I needed to get through the struggle of a Monday. Cool t-shirt too. Straight inside, coffee machine on and the beans loaded. Now I am particular with my coffee. It's going to take me a couple of cups to get the settings right on my machine, but that is a good looking cup. Back in the workshop I get the fork stripped out to replace the seals. I compress the fork spring so I can get to the top cap nut, undo that and spin the top cap off. And now the most important part of a fork service is the drain and clean down. The constant movement of parts means tiny little metal filaments are shaved off continuously while the suspension's moving, so you need to make sure you remove all of that and then replace it with fresh oil. That's why fork oil is actually a service item, because it does degrade over time with all of these metal filaments. That's the new oil going in. The damp assembly is bled and then the oil level is checked. You can do that with a ruler, you don't need a fancy plunger, although that would make my life a lot easier. Back in the bike, it's super important to torque all of the yoke clamp bolts. It's really easy to over tighten them and this crushes the outer fork leg, causing stiction in the fork. And then I get on to organising my workshop. I hate having half empty cans lying about. And who else has a pile of notebooks like this, half scribbled on? I do one every time I do a set of valve clearances. It's quite a nice reminder to see how many of those jobs I've been doing recently. Let's take this CBR 250 out on a test ride, a bike that I've wanted to ride for over 10 years. It's in my workshop because it's difficult to start and a general look over, but it's starting great now. Out on the road, we need to give it some time before we hit that 18,000 RPM rev limiter. We need to get it warmed up properly. After 15-20 minutes, the bike should be nice and warm, so I pull over at the side of the road, give it a good check over, and then we can start to use that rev range properly. It didn't disappoint. This bike is awesome. With that massive rev range, you've regularly got to drop a gear to pull away. It's just so much fun. Look, it is not the fastest bike in the world. Do not let that noise deceive you. It's like an angry bumblebee stuck in a jar. But it was everything I expected it to be, just an absolute riot. I'm having to rearrange my workshop to make room for this. Even if it's not your type of bike, you've got to appreciate it. Let me just show you around it. It's a 1944 Indian that's been restored and heavily modified at the same time. So that will make it really usable and a lot more reliable. It's had a hydraulic clutch conversion. This has all been one-off machined. It's got an internal cable pull on the throttle that runs to a more modern Amal carb. Down here, it's got a 12-volt generator, so we can give it modern electrics. And that's why it's here, to make a full wiring loom. And to keep in line with the style of the bike, we're going to keep it looking traditional, so we'll use traditional sheathings, but we'll use modern electrical components, modern multi-plugs, LED bulbing, push-button switches, along with modern fusing. I've wired several bikes now for the engineer who makes bikes like this. I'll link his profile below. Here's another really cool feature. You see the left throttle spins? Well, that's on purpose. It's for the advance and retard of the ignition timing. I am all for modifying old bikes to make them usable and more reliable and just better. Because you know what? Technology has improved since 1944. It doesn't have to be a restoration exactly how it was. I love things like this. I'm going to watch some motocross. Because the British National is at Ling, which is just down the road from me. Despite the weather being horrendous, it's still made for great racing. And even though there was big names there, yep, that's Jeffrey Hurling's racing in little old Norfolk, I was here for one thing, to see the new Triumph 250. And it looked fantastic. It's impossible to say how it's going to ride without physically riding one, but with only a handful in the UK, I just wanted to go have a look. I think it's fantastic another manufacturer has entered the motocross game. Even though I haven't ridden a motocross bike in over 7 years, today did not make me want to ride one again. Just look at the state of that. And even if your bike gets stuck in the mud, the racing just goes on. And it was cool to see the regulars sticking it to the world champion.